Okay, good afternoon. Hello and welcome to this, the third of the Research and Evidence Facilities series of webinars. For those of you who don't know the Research and Evidence Facility, or the REF, it's a research consortium led by SOAS, the University of London, with the University of Manchester in the UK and Sahan in Nairobi. And it's been established by the EU Emergency Trust Fund for Africa to conduct independent research into migration, displacement and development in the Greater Horn of Africa region. We're looking to generate new evidence and policy relevant knowledge. For more details, please do see our website. My name is Oliver Bakewell and I'm part of the REF team leading research on migration and development. I'm based at the Global Development Institute at the University of Manchester. And in today's webinar, we're focusing on the relationships between economic and employment opportunities and mobility in the Horn of Africa. And we're picking up on some of the issues raised in a REF study conducted in Uganda and Ethiopia, which explored the impact of technical and vocational education and training, Tibet, on young people's migration. It was asking questions about how far completion of training may change people's ideas, attitudes, and action in relation to migration. So for today's discussion, we're delighted to have contributions from three speakers who come at these issues from different contexts and perspectives. I'll briefly introduce them and then hand over to them to make their interventions. So first to go will be Dr. Kalyango Ronald Seba from Kampala, based at the School of Women and Gender Studies in Makerere University. Ronald was involved in the Tibet study undertaken by the REF. He was leading the research team that conducted our field work and analysis in Uganda. The second speaker, speaking from Addis Ababa, Pierpaolo Bergamini, is team lead of socioeconomic development and job creation at the Italian Agency for Development Cooperation in Addis. Until the end of last month, he was coordinator of the program SINCE, Stemming Irregular Migration in Northern and Central Ethiopia. And some of the activities of SINCE were included in the REF study. So we've had some involvement with him on this study before. Finally, we will hear from Caroline Njuki, the Chief Technical Advisor for the ILO Prospects Programme in Kenya. And that involves work including building skills and improving access to employment for displaced populations and host communities. So I hope that their different interventions will raise many questions and points for discussion. And we'll follow this up after they've spoken. We do encourage you to submit these in the chat function on Zoom. And if there's any points that need, we may invite some of you to be able to present them in person at the end, depending on the time. We'll see how we manage it. But we will have at least 20 minutes or hopefully more at the end to follow up on discussion. So the time is short and there may be many more questions than we can cover in the time of this webinar, but we hope we can respond. And if we can't respond to questions in the discussion here, we can follow up afterwards and keep communicating with you after this. So without further ado, I want to hand over to our first speaker, Ronald Kalyango. Ronald, the floor is yours for your 10 minutes.
Thank you so much, Oliver, for the introductions. And thank you so much, Oliver, for the introductions. And although I somehow missed part of your introductory remarks because of a network issue, but all the same, I think we can go ahead. Today, I'm talking about youth vocational education and training and migration in the Horn of Africa with a specific case study from Uganda, where we carried out the research in the three districts of Arua, Adjumani, and Kiriandongo. as part of the REF team in Uganda and funded by the European Union. And we carried out the work under the auspices of Enable, and to really look at with a focus on vocational training and with a focus on vocational training. I think most of us appreciate that youth unemployment and underemployment remain widespread and are considered major drivers of migration. And I think we have a lot of evidence on this within the African region and Uganda in particular, because unemployment and the very limited economic opportunities for both young people is a massive problem across the continent. And we always talk in terms of the youth bulge. The growing youth population seems only likely to exacerbate the scale of unemployment. With a growing number of young people and limited job opportunities, it's raising serious questions on the question of unemployment. For the question of Uganda, the increasing number of refugees, especially from South Sudan, and also from the DR Congo, where I'm told every week today we receive about 1,000 from DR Congo, from the Ituri region. It goes ahead to further exacerbate the scale of unemployment and opportunities within the country. For the project we carried out, we explored the relationship between the problem of youth unemployment and irregular migration. In particular, the impact of improved access to better quality employment through education and vocational training on young people's inclination to migrate to other countries in the region. There's always been a question of why do the young people keep on migrating? And so we raised the question of Tibet and vocational training and skills training, and how it contributes to that. And this is basically because there are too few job opportunities for young people in the formal sector, especially for those who lack the requisite skills. And this is worse for refugees who often come in without their papers and cannot ably apply for particular job opportunities. And the vast majority of the young people who join the labor force, especially in Uganda, remain in informal employment. In other words, it's not formal employment. It is always short-term. Some people refer to it as casual work. Others just short-term opportunities here and there to earn a daily living to survive by, but nothing really formal. And also you find that unemployment rates for young women in particular exceed that of the young men due to reasons of unequal access to education, training opportunities, and unequal gender roles, among others. When we talk about unequal access to education for the women in particular, we are talking in terms of distance from their places of residence to any available training facility in their locality. We're talking about limited access because of time. Women spend a lot of time in their care roles as mothers, as caretakers of children, as the ones responsible for fetching water, among others. And so this reduces on their time availability to participate in training opportunities. And then also the other one is the question of transport and also the gender biases in trainings, where we baptize certain courses as male and other courses as female. So all these contribute to the unemployment rates for the young women by virtue of the fact that few of them are able to acquire the requisite skills. The research in particular in Uganda was carried out in Arua, Jumani, and Kiriandongo. And we surveyed young graduates that were currently enrolled in an Enable program that is within the 3 districts, currently enrolled, and also the new applicants, trying to examine what are their aspirations. And we had a total of 307 respondents, 110 were South Sudanese, and 197 were Ugandans. We also carried out in-depth interviews with young women and men that we identified during the survey interview to further examine their goals, their challenges, and their mobility patterns, and what they thought about the training and where they would end up at the end of the day. We also had key informant interviews with various Tibet providers. That included Enabel, it included World Hunger, for instance, it included others from Kiryandongo, and also district leaders within these areas, and also the Tibet training institutions like Omugo Training Center and Ragem in Arua, and also the Kiryandongo Vocational Training Center, and as well as other key informants. We also had a chat with the EU office in Kampala, and all these provided very useful insights that speak to the findings that I'm sharing right now. We discovered that we have 2 types of trainings for Tibet. One is the short term, which is less than 3 months, mainly aimed at quick skills. We call them the quick impact skills, where you come in for 3 months or 2 days or 3 days, and then you learn how to make sandals, you learn how to bake, you learn how to quickly have something you can that can easily turn into an income for you and your family. So those are some of the quick skills, about 3 months or 3 months or maximum about 6 months. And then and these were, as we discovered, were the most sought after, because they gave them opportunity for a quick income at the end of the day. And then we had the long-term trainings in the training institutions like Ragem and Omugo, and also the Kiryandongo technical training. And these take about 2 years and above, and have stringent entry requirements. And so because of this, few of these people were interested in taking up the long-term training opportunities. And we also found that there is a demand among the trainees for both technical and business skills. There is an emphasis on technical training, get the skill, but a discussion with Enabel revealed that there is also a very huge gap in soft business skills, things like timekeeping, things like ethics, things like how to, or customer care, among others. Some of these are still largely lacking within among the trainees and within the programs. Also on skills building, we found out that Tibet programming is proving successful in helping young people improve their prospects for livelihoods, especially with the quick skills the young people are able to find to start their own employment opportunities, and also to find their own work, and also to get engaged in other and working for others, such as in the hotels, in the welding workshops, among others. They're able to find employment, they're able to find work. And we also found that the trainees through the trainings are well equipped with skills that allow them to earn a living and invest in their own small businesses, and also acquire further training. Here we also found out that the trainees also get a benefit of startup kits, some of them and in groups, and then they're able to work together. Although there is still a challenge about startup kits, the issue of organizing them as a group, working together as a group, the migratory patterns as area to another are always a challenge for the young people. And we also found out that over 2/3 of the graduates felt that their living conditions had improved since completing their Tibet courses. And I want to quickly mention that they feel that their living conditions had improved. And sometimes they would compare themselves with those that had gone through formal training and education, who are still looking for jobs within either the refugee settlements or within the districts, and they could not earn an income as compared to those that had completed Tibet education, and then they were able to quickly earn a living, and they could easily support themselves, among others. And I think this one was really a boost for their esteem and confidence, and they really liked this. When we talk about the link to migration, Tibet graduates, we discovered, seek out employment opportunities. And on a question of where they would like to go, they always wanted to go to a place where they would find work that was commensurate with their skills that they had acquired. So the movement would be either within Arua town, or it would be to Kiriandongo, to the oil pipeline, to the dam that is being built in that area, or they'll be moving into other places in households where they can do electrical repairs, among others. So you find that where there is work opportunities, that's where they would be able to go. And in this regard, we also found out that even if the work was in South Sudan, in some instances, some refugees reported asking their co-trainees who were hosts or Ugandans to join them in South Sudan because there were job opportunities. And so in this way, what we learn is that the employment prospects drive the migration, with majority moving to either the nearest location, or for the refugees who wanted to return home because now they had acquired a skill that they thought they could be able to put into practice and then also employ the others. But also in this of importance was the social capital and interconnectedness and how they drive migration, because the friends and colleagues always tell others about job opportunities, and then they share information, and then they attract them to go to particular places. And it's always young people find it easier to go to a place where they already know someone and who can help them settle in very fast, and then give them the information that they need, and to also to share. Having looked at the link with migration, I want to mention a few challenges that are being experienced. One is that the trainings favor males more than the females, because as I've already mentioned about the differences in gender roles and responsibilities, questions of access, questions of endurance. Some women want to come with their children, and sometimes there's no place to really breastfeed. And then others want to come, but the husbands will really want them back home to complete their household chores and cook the food, among others, and they don't see the relevance of them going in. But even despite these challenges, some of the women that participated and took on courses like tailoring, among others, with the COVID-19 pandemic, they were able to quickly engage into the making of face masks, for instance, within the refugee settlements, or making soaps that were also used in the times of sanitization, and in this way they were able to also earn a living. The issue of COVID-19 is a result of my follow-up with Annabelle. I was having a discussion with them prior to this presentation, and that's where I got this kind of feedback that I'm giving you right now. And we also have the other challenge is that the private sector has minimal presence in the study districts. The private sector, and talking to the lady from Private Sector Foundation, there is a revelation that they have a limited presence within the districts, especially Arua, Adjumani, and Kiriandongo. And so their participation becomes limited. It also means that the trainees, where they can do internships or building up their skills and affirming their skills, these opportunities remain rather limited because of the small size of the private sector. And those that are present are largely in the informal sector. And so taking on trainees, usually they see it as burdensome, and they don't see the opportunity of either having extra labor or the opportunity of training the other human resources, among others. And they also have challenges of capital and accommodating sizable numbers of interns or people that are looking for the requisite skills. So you find that skills like motor vehicle mechanics becomes a bit rare. Yes, please. How am I doing on time?
You're at the end of your time, so if you could move quite quickly to a conclusion, that would be helpful.
Okay. Thank you, Oliver. Let me just conclude with the recommendations. The Tibet interventions must be based on a thorough analysis of the local job market and should explore ways to link Tibet causes with employers more systematically, because Tibet training, for instance, you find people training in motor vehicle mechanics, they're in a refugee camp, and they only see one vehicle maybe in a week or two. And so the question is, are they earning and learning relevant skills to their context? Tibet interventions should also explore ways to include employer and business participation in programming to ensure trainees are receiving skills demanded, and also to create ways and mechanisms of linking the private sector and involving them in Tibet trainings. Thank you so much for listening. Over to you, Oliver.
Thank you very much, Ronald. And I'm going to move straight over to Pier Paolo to present a different perspective from Ethiopia. And so over to you, Pier Paolo.
Okay, thank you, Oliver. I follow one question that I think is a general question, and then I will bring the experience of the SIS program on this issue. So the question that I want to highlight is, how do the programs, funded program that aim to boost youth employment affect mobility and migration? So are these programs effective, especially the one on Tibet, working or not? In my opinion, with the SIS program that is funded by the European Trust Fund with the 20 million euro in Ethiopia and is finished just last month. We were working for 3 years. We worked in 5 regions of Ethiopia. We experienced that the irregular migration reduction where mainly the main factor is the poverty. So is the income of the people in the especially. So and they dream to have a better life in a more developed context. So due to this assumption, that is what we started with, we were working on different aspects, not only training, but also in other aspects that I will tell you now. Of course, a funded program like our program is impacting mainly on direct beneficiaries and indirectly in the related community, but unfortunately, there are also some socioeconomic contexts that are influencing not only the program activity, are the one influencing the area where you have an intervention. This is normal, but there are external factors like the investment environment, the political stability, the energy and water availability or distribution, logistic and banking infrastructure, regional and international market, the forex currency availability. So all of these are factors that are not under control of the program. So, of course, after saying so, in general, we noticed that providing only professional training is not enough to stabilize youth potentially irregular migrant. There should be also other elements to succeed in this task. And facilitating wage employment, we were focusing on wage employment, is one of the strategies that seems to work well. In particular, we noticed that the training, in our case, was a short-term training, should be really tailored according to the enterprise's need and include in curricula also internship and after graduate apprenticeship in order to possibly guarantee a future stable job and therefore reduce the irregular migration. We don't have also to forget the soft skill or life skill component in the training. As the previous presenter was saying, these are very needed, especially for enterprises, but in order to succeed in the job. Therefore, another element is the labor market assessment, addressing enterprises' manpower needs in a specific economic sector and in a specific location area is also fundamental. But it's also important that Tibet, the institution, continuously involve enterprises, not only when designing courses, but also during the whole course time, because as I said before, the internship is also a very important element. And what we did with our program, we established multi-stakeholder platform with a focus on job creation issue involving Tibet, but also involving public employment service, as well as other public and private actors like enterprises, sectorial association, chamber of commerce, youth or women association, other government office or body, assisting the economic development area and the job creation. As a result of this work of these platforms, we were able to sign and to promote job creation-oriented private-public partnership. These also were very important, even if, of course, there are papers that are written and they can be put in a drawer and not attended, but at least there are some element of involvement from both sides, government and enterprises. Another element that we were looking at is the youth facilitation and mentoring on how to deal with enterprises during their internship, not only with providing their soft skill at the training, but during the internship or apprenticeship. And the follow-up on possible critical issues or misunderstanding is also something that is very important to avoid high turnover or drop out from school, but also from the job. Tibet during internship and public employment services during apprenticeship should be capacitated on this task, both with skills and infrastructure and equipment. This we found that is also a very important element that is to consider to stabilize youth on work. I was also to underline that there is a difference in kind of intervention and activities that are being implemented in rural areas, rural or even most remote areas and environment where smallholder agriculture is normally the only activity present. And the intervention to be implemented in this kind of area are really different from the one that you can implement in urban or big town environment, where the informal work is very much present and easier to find. So often the youth, they prefer this informal work to gather a sufficient amount of money, and with this money collected, they pay for their irregular migration. In the first context, where the rural context is there are of course very few enterprises, and internal mobility is very easy, where non-farming activity is possible. So they go mainly to the nearest town. So for this reason, the kind of activities also that you are putting in place, the kind of approach is a bit different. What we find out that is relatively more easy to work in the rural environment, where people is really more engaged in looking for a job in order to have a better life. Then in the urban or big town context, we were working also in Addis, where opportunities, as I said before, of informal work job are often offering more at the end of the month than the formal job and activity. Another things to consider, even the presenter before was underlying, is the gender issue. Especially in contexts where there are the work are male dominated. We were in the construction sector work, or the opposite, like in the textile sector where they are female dominated. So this is also something that has to be considered. And in order to address the need and to try to balance also the gender on this sector of activities. So the gender component should be cross-cutting and always consider not only when activate engagement, but also after on the needs of the workers in the different contexts. I want also to mention the different impact between short-term training that is also, of course, providing semi-skilled workers, which is good for the most vulnerable beneficiaries or clients, and easier to design on specific enterprises' needs. While the normal training curricula are providing, of course, higher qualification, but not often the enterprise are requesting them, while they are more requesting semi-skilled or low-skilled manpower. I don't want to add more at this point. Maybe I prefer if there are specific questions. Of course, our program is already ended, but we have a lot of data available on all what was implemented in these 5 regions. And we addressed more than 8,000 youths and women, and more than, say, 7,200 Tibet courses beneficiaries were addressing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pierpaolo. And we're starting to see some questions coming up in the chat. Please do add to those, and we'll pick those up after we've heard from our final speaker, Caroline Njuki, who I invite to the floor now. And she will continue for us.
Thank you, Oliver, and good afternoon to everyone who is online. Can you see my presentation?
We can. Can you make it in the full display mode?
Yes, Caroline, we can see your presentation.
Okay, so thank you so much. Yeah, I think we're good. Thank you, and I'm going to look at pretty much what the speakers before me have, and that's economic and employment opportunities, and the link to mobility broadly framed in the Horn of Africa, but I'll make a special reference to Kenya. So just as an overview is, and the other speakers have already spoken to that, youth unemployment remains a challenge for many countries in this part of the world, quite significant in Kenya, according to the Kenya Household and Population Survey. In Kenya, youth unemployment was at 38%, and that's quite a really high number. Many young people still continue to work in the agricultural sector, the agricultural and the informal sector, and I think Robert spoke about this in great detail. And informality in most of Africa ranges between 80 to 90%. In Kenya, we have between 84, 86% over the last, or almost over the last decade. the informal sector, as we know it, has some of the highest deficit, decent work deficits, from low wages, no contracts. There's absolutely no social protection in most cases. And especially now, in light of COVID, we've seen what the impact of that is. Very little considerations for safety and health, rights are really often not discussed in those spaces. There's no representation, even in trade unions, etc. Then the other issue that we need to be cognizant of is the reality of skills mismatch occasioned by education and training that's not relevant to industry needs. And I use industry meaning more broadly, it's also trades. And Kenya hosts now close to 500,000 refugees in the two camps, but also in the urban areas. And the refugees do not live in a different reality. And that's why I painted the picture that I did before. But however, their situation, of course, is made worse by restrictions on movement, which of course limits the kind of possibilities or opportunities they could access, and also administrative challenges around accessing a work permit and therefore employment. So when we look at entrepreneurship and youth employment, in the absence of formal employment opportunities, many young people see entrepreneurship as, as the alternative. Some people have said that this is being seen as the magical bullet to solve Africa's unemployment challenge. And it's the same in Kenya. And so we have many of them starting small and micro enterprises with funding from friends and family. It's not many that start these businesses with funding from formal financial institutions, including banks or even microfinance institutions, because this remains a challenge. And as other speakers before me have said, often there is a challenge of accessing business development support, mentorship, etc. And what this means is that young people that start businesses, continue to run them in such small scale with no opportunity for growth, and they actually continue to live in poverty. So even as we speak about unemployment numbers, a lot of realities hidden in those unemployment numbers. We're also talking about youth that are underemployment, but sadly also youth that have jobs, but they live in abject poverty and with absolutely no prospects for improvement. And that is how then a lack of employment becomes a trigger for the decision to move. We have the discussion between, the rural and the urban youth, who's more prone to move, and, what are the different realities that they live in. So whereas, of course, many young people in the rural areas work in the agricultural sector, their counterparts in the urban areas try to get jobs in the informal sector. And with both of these groups of young people have got limited opportunities, as I've said, to really improve, economic possibilities for themselves and think of migration as the alternative. The majority of evidence that we have speaks to the fact that the first option is often to nearby areas. They could be to nearby towns, small urban areas. And for those that are in urban areas, it could be to a bigger urban center or cross the border to the most neighboring country. It's a smaller number that actually decide to travel across continents, etc. But we've also seen that in rural and urban areas where opportunities are available with governance structures that young people feel they can rely on, the decision to move is less likely to be made, and even less so to move to another country. Agriculture being a main employer, as with the deficit it sees, there is a possibility to address that and engage young people in that sector, not necessarily in land production. And many young people that we work with really indicate that they don't want to till the land. They've seen their parents till the land with nothing to show for it. But looking at how to unlock the opportunities in the agricultural value chain, the logistics, transport. Now, of course, everyone talking about digital transformation. So how can young people, some of them really survey in digitalization. How can they harness that opportunity to provide services to farmers and earn a living, but also participate in seed input business, but also food processing that is seen as less, it's not as dirty and it's not what their families did, and they still have got nothing to show for it. So the response to this, Tibet and entrepreneurship, we've seen over the last decade or so, with the leadership, I would say, of the AU and that cascading to the national level, a lot of efforts going towards strengthening of Tibets. And it's also the realization that we have this category that we call the NEET, those youth not in education, employment and training. That's quite significant. And according to the last Kenya Household and Population Survey of 2019, the results were that 1 out of 7 young person in Kenya is not in education, employment or training. That's quite worrying. And women are twice as likely to be in that situation due to the reasons that have been alluded to before. And Tibet, of course, offers opportunities for short-term trainings that can lead to employment within a very short time, but also an opportunity for inclusion for those that may not be able to access higher education in universities, for those that are returning, for refugees, etc., but also those who fall off jobs and are looking to return to the labor market. However, unfortunately, the Tibet sector, and in Kenya and across the region, because we have many studies that speak to that, continue to perpetuate skills mismatch. Tibet institutions are not as agile. They are not necessarily speaking to the trades, the industry within the regions where they are, so that they train young people in the skills that are really required. Occupational standards remain unrevised in so many of these areas, so that very redundant courses are being offered. And so young people will qualify, but then they still cannot find jobs. And I will speak to this when I speak about entrepreneurship, and those that choose the path of self-employment then hit the challenge of access to finance, business development, etc. And I think something else that the speaker before me alluded to is the lack of opportunities for work-based learning, where this really provides young people with the opportunities to learn on the job, to learn those skills that, well, ideally would be taught in a training environment, but that's not happening. The employability skills, the soft skills, how do you keep time, how do you relate with people, etc. But also very important, some of the technical skills, because industry changes so fast, and the training institutions are not adapting as fast. So those skills that are, whether it's the technology that different industries using, that's very different from the training equipment that most of the training institutions do have. And the ILO has responded, for instance, sort of to prove concept of how you can work with employers by working with the Kenya Association of Manufacturers and the training institutions in a dual track training, where young people spend 30 to 40% of time at the institute and 60 to 70% at the workplace. And this has provided better transition opportunities into the labor market. I've spoken to the challenge of startup capital or startup and growth capital. And what's very interesting and something that I've found quite surprising, for instance, is that an enterprise development fund in Kenya meant for young people requires applicants to provide a guarantee either through belonging to a group, and many young people do not want to be in such groups because they have different perspectives on what they want to do, or providing a motor vehicle logbook or a land deed ownership. And we all know that young people have got very limited access or even ownership to land. On return and reintegration efforts in Tibet, I think this is really key. And we've seen that a lot of that in the Horn of Africa, less of it in Kenya, is that most returnees are often offered an opportunity to reintegrate either through starting businesses or learning a trade. by institutions that support them. And this is a model that has been quite popular with the EU Trust Fund. But the challenge is that these efforts are ad hoc and often not rooted in any labor market institution. So you will find that the trades, the skills that are gained are skills that are being offered by local training institutions that haven't taken any consideration on what the labor market demands. And we've also seen very little effort to improve market systems so that they work for these people, so that they create more employment for insignificant numbers. And recently, the ILO approach to integrated market systems really has been lauded for being quite key in having structural changes. And an example I give is, instead of providing startup grants to young people, which is a one-off, how is it that you improve the regulatory environment on access to finance so that continuously young people are able to access finance to start and improve their businesses? For instance, through guarantees. Grants are one-off, they cannot be a solution over a long time. And yeah, I'll stop at that. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Caroline. Okay, so we've been gathering some questions in the chat, and I'm going to try and gather some of these together because they do sort of fit. There's some of it about the mechanics, I guess, if you like, of these sort of programs. So Kenya Kilombe asking about the main trades pursued by students and how are these assessed in relation to the current markets, were they related to the current markets? So it's just a question of fact about what trades are being pursued by students. Be interesting to hear particularly from these three countries, maybe if there's feedback from the speakers. But there's also questions about how people actually encouraged into the programs. Were there incentives given? Were particular actions taken to encourage young women to attend trainings? Was transportation, is transportation provided to come into vocational training? So I wonder if maybe you could give any response to these sorts of questions. Ronald, Pierpaolo or Caroline could respond. What sort of training subjects or trades are the most important or the most relevant, the most pursued by students? And how are people actually drawn into the training? Are there incentives provided? Are there particular methods, techniques being used to encourage young women to join training? And especially getting over cultural norms and barriers to particular areas. As Ronald said in his presentation, some trades are seen as particularly gendered.
I could give an example, one example, Oliver, of a training, the track training that I mentioned, and the host communities in Turkana and Garissa. These are the two main, not the two main, but the two refugee hosting areas in Kenya. And what you have been, for instance, in garment making or in the food industry. But when you look at this, at the space, at the environment where these people are, these are not necessarily the skills that are required. Most refugees, receive food aid and they cook at home. So there's less, there's not as big a demand, for instance, for those, for chefs or for people who are, and then very interestingly, these two areas in Kenya have oil prospecting happening. We have major oil companies in these areas. A lot of heavy pipeline infrastructure that is being developed. And when we looked at, you know, what are the skills that are going to support these sectors, one of very, you know, almost very, not something we think about, welding, pipeline welding came up as a key skill that is required and that is just not there in the local population. And so, you know, for us, it was obvious, then train young people in this skill. And it was not just that they can use it when they are in Kenya. When you look at where these refugees come from, Somalia, South Sudan, these are all countries where the same skill could be used because those sectors are also emerging. And so, you know, instead of offering something that didn't have resonance in the labor market, we offered these, and the young people have really embraced this. Now, the gender dynamic, attracting these young people, what was the incentive? The incentive is that the ILO is paying for this course. From the student side, well, they have to, you know, really participate in the school, do their workplace learning, etc. And for the young women, especially in Dadaab, we didn't, you know, this is not a skill that's seen as acceptable for young women. And so we used one of the trainers from the institute who's a woman, a female engineer, to sort of speak to the women and speak about the opportunities for growth that exist in this sector. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
In our case, I just go back to what I was explaining. We designed 41 new or improved short-term training. And the sector were selected, general sector are as the most job requested sector in Ethiopia, which were agriculture, agribusiness and processing, construction, metalwork, leather and textile. Then we included a bit of hospitality and like this. But again, the main job that has to be done is to look at the context, the local context where you are going to work, because beneficiaries, they come from one area. And if you want to stabilize them, you have to see what that area, what is the opportunity of work. So you have to go there and see the enterprises and see the socioeconomic environment. And this was studied together with the Tibet and decide enterprises and Tibet, what is the main skill needed for them. So there is not something that we can go there with the mind and say, no, in this year, we train on barber shop or I don't know, something, any that you have in mind, but you have to go in the field and see what is there already, which kind of enterprise, what is needed. For example, in rural area, we had a very good impact in working with cooperatives, because primary cooperatives, primary producer in that area we were working, they are producing wheat and vegetables. But we discovered that, of course, there is a big problem, as in many countries in Africa, in where to sell these products. Normally, the buyer are coming and they offer a very low price. So stores and keeping the stores and the storekeeper, collector groups, and such kind of job are missing. So we were, after discussing with the cooperative system, we designed training on collectors, on storekeepers, on this kind of people that were employed after by the cooperative, become member of the cooperative at some time. So it depends. On terms of allowances or benefits, we were providing benefits for training in terms of allowance for transport, and in some cases, of course, for the gender issue, even for women with that have under 5, we were adding some more, because if they have a child, it is difficult for them to go for a short-term training. And short-term training were maximum 3 months, where 70% is practical in internship in enterprises. After that, they graduate, they get their certificate of competence, And after that, there was another question on, we did also support apprenticeship schemes. So there was also this component in our program.
Thank you. I'm actually going to, I think we're going to run out of time if we focus on this question, so I'm going to pass off and run. I would say that the report, we have quite a lot of detail about the different things that we explored in the Tibet report, and we post links to that, the report that we prepared in the chat.
Sorry, just to add, sorry, Oliver. Yeah, I have seen question also, they wanted to have studies on everything, even as we have done 4 case studies, and one is also in the impact of the public employment service and the other things, and they are all available in our website. If you want, I can put the link where they can download them, and they are free.
Please do put the links in the chat, and please in the chat do continue a chat that doesn't have to involve us picking things up. If you can respond to comments in the chat, please do. I just wanted to pick up a couple of other questions, because it's a question about targeting. Sarah Bazzini asked, was a particular targeting criteria for participants to vocational training? And I want to extend that question, particularly think about how the concern about mobility. I mean, a lot of the programs are funded by the UTF with an idea that this is addressing challenges of mobility and dealing with issues of irregular migration. So we're going to say, how did that change, or did it change the targeting for the different programs that were under consideration? Particularly thinking of the enabled programs that you saw, Ronald, in Uganda, or the programs of SINS in Ethiopia. And Caroline may also have something to say from what she's seen with the ILO work. Ronald, maybe you want to say something about the targeting question, because you haven't said anything. Give me a chance for feedback.
Thank you, Oliver, for that. On targeting, the programs mainly targeted refugees and hosts. That is for especially in places like Arua and Adjumani, while in Kiriandongo, the main targets were mainly the host populations. And the focus was on skills training that would enhance their livelihoods, to be able to earn a living and to be able to be self-sustaining as part of the self-reliance strategy for the country. And so in so doing, the targeting did not really focus so much on whether or not there will be mobility to other places, but it so occurred that the trainees had to look out for opportunities, and that's what they did for themselves in the choice of trades that they wanted to learn. For the motor vehicles, they looked at opportunities within their locality. For the masons, they looked at opportunities in the building industry. And for the welders, they also looked at opportunities that were within the building and construction industry, whether within their locality. And maybe that's why you could see a difference. Those that were inward looking, look for skills that they could implement within their localities, and those that were a bit open to find work wherever, like the electricians and others, then they picked up on those other kinds of skills. Over to you, Oliver.
Okay, great, thank you. I don't know if you want to say anything on this, Pierre Paul, on the targeting question. No, okay.
Yeah. For what concerned the selection of the beneficiary, the process in our case was quite long, because we had to involve the local government. Of course, we work with the public employment service fully. And so they were involved in the definition of the criteria. We give general criteria. Of course, we target the vulnerable, potentially irregular migrant based on poverty So they have to come from a poor family, and the maximum, the minimum grade 8, because otherwise it was difficult to have a Tibet education. And these are the main, let's say, issue. Of course, we also addressed the gender. Since the beginning, we said 50% should be female of the selected beneficiaries. So each district in Ethiopia, we call them Wereda, they were setting up committees, and they went up to Kebele level. It means, let's say, the small village level, with the government involved, and they posted the selected beneficiary. And if somebody has something to say, it was also possible to readjust. This was the process that we did for selection.
Okay, thank you. I want to pick up a point that's been, and there's a specific question I know it's posed advanced about the to Caroline about how best we can improve the situation of refugees with disabilities in Dadaab and Kakuma, those who own SMEs, and this whole question about inclusion and how we include different sectors, people who might be seen as hard to reach or hard to include within the employment market. How can they be involved within these employment programs? But also there's another question to Caroline about regulatory, but I think she might have picked that up in the chat. But maybe she should also, I'm going to give her the floor, because I think there's also another fundamental question which has been raised about the fact that these a lot of the learning about technical and vocational education training and employment training, it feels like we keep learning the same things again and again. And how can we make more fundamental changes? So why research seems to give the same initiatives back. It's the same feedback back. This is a comment from Georgia Coles. Why do we keep ending up going round in some of the same circles? Maybe Caroline, you've got a perspective on that.
Yeah, thanks, Oliver, and I think already.
I like to give you the difficult ones.
That's okay. Well, I actually just mentioned on the chat box what I think are some of the reasons why we on youth unemployment and skills mismatch. I think that we are seeing the needle is moving. It could be moving very, very slowly, but I think it is. And we have seen in the last 5 years a move towards what is being called the competency-based education and training. And this is education that is more focused on learning outcomes, learning itself. The education and training ecosystem is now really keen to have learners, really pick up skills and competencies, that will help them solve, challenges. So I think that is really a step in the right direction. And in the Tibet sector, we have seen in Kenya again a return of trainers, having trainers attached to industry, learners, the need for learners to have work. But the reality is that some of those trainers have not even seen the technology that industry is applying. And especially in public institutions, the resources to buy such, complex, every 2 years, that the possibility is very minimal. And so how can you still support training institutions, trainers to new technologies and new methods, new approaches. So there are a few things that are happening that I think will have some good outcomes. But the other thing is that now we are seeing a lot more mention on, well, maybe not uptake as yet, as much as we'd like to see, but we are talking more about what is the labor market telling us? What are those skills that are required? That is one thing, because the labor market, that's speaking to available jobs. And let's face it, the other challenge is a lack of jobs completely. So employment stimulation, whether that is through public employment programs, through injecting, through a change in microeconomics of countries, and debt is a part of it, etc. Those discussions now are more, I think, in the public domain, and there's a recognition. Yes, even if we placed everyone in the available jobs, the unemployment will still be very high because the available jobs are so few. So how do we really stimulate more jobs for young people? I don't know if that really answers just a few perspectives.
Okay, thank you. I'm actually going to ask now Sabrina, who particularly asked to comment on the Ethiopia, on the SINS program. I'm not sure how she wants to comment, but Sabrina, if you want to unmute yourself and make your comment.
Yes, very briefly, because Pier Paolo has already covered a lot, and I see he has also shared all the links and everything. But I really wanted to stress, because I saw some of the questions that were asked, some of the aspects that were raised as, being an impediment to proper Tibet linkages with the job market and so on. I think one of the important interventions as part of the SINS project was really to work a little bit on establishing systems with some kind, hopefully, of sustainability as well. Linking, really, creating platforms for dialogue between the local authorities, so let's say more the public administration, but as well as the private sector, with the young people that are looking for jobs, with different, relevant stakeholders. It was not an easy task, not an easy undertaking, but I think it has yielded quite good results, especially in some of the regions that Pier Paolo mentioned the project was implemented in. So I think in parallel, we also have to work a little bit in strengthening the systems and creating opportunities for the different actors to dialogue on that. And if we manage to do that, I think 50% of our of the hiccups that we currently see in the Tibet job market systems could be solved, I think. Over.
Okay, thank you very much. We've just got a few minutes left. There's still more questions, and we're not going to be able to tackle them all in the chat. I actually want to push us back, because I've noticed, as I often notice with these discussions, is we're learning a lot about how to do Tibet and how to do employment training, get young people into jobs. Now, the thing that we were particularly set out to explore with our study is the relationship with migration. And as Pier Paolo said in his beginning of his presentation, when you look at that relationship, it's very complicated. There are many other factors that drive people's migration. Employment is an important part of the story, but to tackle youth employment is not necessarily going to have much of a discernible result in relation to tackling issues about migration and concerns about particular forms of migration. So I'd be interested to hear the comments from the panel about particularly that relationship, because if I think investing in Tibet and the findings we had from our study, showed that investment in Tibet, it brings some positive things. And someone has asked in the chat for us to particularly elucidate the benefits that came out of the study. I think we'll have to leave that to the, you can read that in the report, but doesn't necessarily have that much an effect on, in a predictable way, on mobility. It affects it. But I suppose the question I have is how far, if you want to tackle migration or migration concerns, does invest in Tibet actually, is it an obvious way to go, maybe as a way to put it. So I don't know, Pierpaolo, would you like to, because you sort of really stimulate that thought with your comment about the many different factors.
Of course, as I said, depend on the target you have. We targeted the most vulnerable. Sorry, because we were thinking that the assumption is that, of course, these are the most prone to irregular migration because they will not have other ways of surviving. So they have to move from the situation they are. There is no other choice. And poverty, in this case, was selected as the main push factor. But of course, there are many other elements, and a program cannot work. Since was already broad action because we were working with Tibet, 28 of them. We were working with enterprises, 322 small medium enterprises. We were working with government, 17 multi-stakeholder platform and a lot of people. And that is already a lot for a program to handle. But of course, the banking system, for example, is an issue because the Forex, the investment thing, or other problems like energy, power, availability. If you have an enterprise, how can you produce if you don't have all the setup, all the services? And many other factors where a program alone cannot do. So the correct approach, I agree with Sabrina that was highlighting this aspect, and I was not highlighting enough. I just mentioned passing by because there are many aspects. But the right approach is to involve all the actors of that area that you believe they are, let's say, they have something to say or some in the issue of job creation related to also to migration, to a same table and discuss and start to know each other and work together. That is the only way.
Okay, thank you. Ronald, very, very briefly, we're just running against the clock now, but do you have any comment to make on the relationship with mobility?
Thank you, Oliver. When we are looking at the relationship with mobility, I think what is critical here is the question of who is likely to move or not. And we are basically looking at the young men moving to acquire jobs and other places, and then the women are taking on skills that were more likely to keep them and settled within a particular and given area. So you find that if you're looking at the skills that are being passed on and the trainings and how they go, you basically see a kind of gender distinction in who is likely to move and who is most likely to stay, and the types of skills that they keep on acquiring. And even the women that ventured into the male-dominated skills trainings, you also see them having a challenge to actually finish and or complete their courses. So those are some of the things that we see within the areas where we did the study. Over to you, Oliver.
Okay, thank you. Caroline, do you have any final words to offer before we close?
Yes, thank you, Oliver. You know, the decision to migrate is often, it has a trigger, but often it's influenced by many other interrelated reasons. the evidence we have shows that migration is expensive. Family and friends have to be able to support those that migrate. Families sell their assets, etc. But also when people have family at the destination, that makes it even more attractive for them to migrate. If they have a skill that they think they could apply at destination, then they will go to destination A and not B. So it's such there are so many reasons that make people to move and to specific locations. And employment is just opportunities is a big one, but it's not the only one. And so trying to create this linkage to, for instance, targeted support to entrepreneurship or targeted training to populations perceived to be more likely to migrate. I think we still need to do a lot more work to establish that causal relationship, because it still seems very far-fetched, and you have one category of people or locality where people are more likely to migrate, then situation changes in another, and those then start migrating. So this causality is a bit more complicated. That's what I would say.
Okay, thank you. And I think we have to draw the session to a close there, but that doesn't. I hope this is starting up a discussion which needs to be followed up about the causality. It's one of the things we hope to do with our studies, just trying to explore what are the connections. And the evidence base, I think, is still quite limited. And there's a lot more work to be done on that, and a lot more discussion. I hope you found this a valuable discussion. I hope it sparked some thought to take you into the evening. And we'll look forward to seeing you in the next webinar, which we will be next month. We will send out details soon. Both Caroline and Ronald have agreed that their presentations can be made available, so we'll make those available on our website, and I think we'll be able to communicate with you all about that when they're up there. And this session is, as you know, has been recorded, so you will be able to pass on a link to this as well for other people. Okay, so thank you all very much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you particularly thank you to Ronald, Caroline, and Pier Paolo.
Thank you
for their contributions to the discussion. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Au revoir.
Au revoir.